So starting off this video, I want to say that I don't think there's going to be a Next Generations. I don't think there's going to be a sequel for Tokyo Ghoul Re. I don't think there's going to be any sort of continuation of any effect in nature. There is a lot of reasons for this, but I'm going to break it up into kind of two core different discussions. The first one's going to be more specifically towards Sue Ishida and how he felt. The second one's going to be kind of a shonen and seinen comparison and kind of the demographic that surrounds them both. For the most part, a lot of Sue Ishida's words and the way he talks about himself, the way he talks about Tokyo Ghoul as a story, can be kind of interpreted in a lot of different ways. There is a good handful of interviews that give you a very good idea on how he felt in total, and I would recommend go reading them, or at least watching my videos that I've done on them, which help you obviously get a better idea. It helps you paint a clearer picture on what Sue Ishida is like as a person. Because the first biggest thing that was quite a bit of a shock value for a lot of different people is Ishida's own feeling towards writing Tokyo Ghoul. For a long time, he felt kind of lost writing Tokyo Ghoul. It's something that he wasn't necessarily happy with, and he struggled to do that for a very long time. Obviously, he paints this as a much more grueling image, as he is trying to keep up with, the weekly content of doing artwork and creating an interesting story. It's a very taxing thing. Creating manga on a weekly basis on the level that he was creating it is something that can easily be detrimental to anyone's health and mentality and how they feel towards their own story. I actually have a lot of respect for Ishida and him not fully coming out about how he felt. Definitely giving us, as readers, his fans, a better insight on who he was as a person. Because he correlates a lot of this emotion towards his own series as a personal thing, obviously. There was a lot of things that just were kind of stuck in his way that he couldn't just brush aside that affected how he felt about his own story. Because it took him so long to kind of find some sort of happiness in his own story, to find some sort of willingness to continue going. Unfortunately, it was kind of more so to the end of the story. At least that's kind of an interpretation of his words. He's been writing for 7.5 years, and 6.5 of those years he was struggling, more or less. He was kind of going week by week, not necessarily hating his story, but finding it very tough and difficult to continue forward. And when the onset of my story is coming to a conclusion, a massive burden gets lifted off your shoulders. Something that he's been working on for so many years is finally coming to a conclusion. He's going to be released from this birdcage, which is evidently his own words, and he will no longer feel like a ghoul in reality. In that aspect of finding happiness and being released from his own story, he also felt entitled to continue writing. He also felt passion, I believe, in a very long time in writing a story. Unfortunately, because he set the dates in of ending his story, it's something that he necessarily couldn't come back from. It was a little bit too late, if that makes any sense. And even though he had some sort of passion and liking for this story towards the end half, and he wanted to continue writing, he just couldn't. It's not to say that he wanted to continue that emotion over to a sequel, or he wants to do OVAs or anything like that. I think he just found that last wind of passion for his story towards the end half, when, a good burden was, slowly being released off his shoulders. The story is coming to an end. His weekly struggle of producing high quality chapters every single week was going to be over, and him finding happiness in the fact can definitely be, a very big thing. The interviews definitely do paint a better picture and a much more grueling picture with how he felt, how writing the story had a massive effect on him. Some in good ways, but more so in bad, and it's definitely a very interesting conversation. With that said, I don't think Sue Ishida's emotion or him as a person wants to continue writing Tokyo Ghoul or Tokyo Ghoul Re. I don't think it's something that he wants to come back to, because even in his kind of Takahashi interview, which was kind of November of last year, because he does mention the ending was more so written in a way that had some sort of definitive answers. Now, obviously that's arguable, but for the most part, it's not something that he'll necessarily come back to anytime soon. It does bring back a lot of emotions for him, does bring back a lot of hardships, and that's completely understandable. Now, the other core subject, which I think is a very big thing that a lot of people do not talk about, is the shonen and seinen comparison. Now, you're probably wondering what I mean by this. I want to start off this this kind of core conversation by asking a question. If you are a manga reader, you read some of the newest series every single week, how often do you see a successful seinen series? Because at the end of the day, you don't see that many successful seinen series, especially weekly manga based. It's very limited to say rare for a series to be like that. For a lot of people, Tokyo Ghoul would have been one of their first seinen series. And I think it's a very good kind of door opener into the community, into the seinen demographic, even though it is rather full on, is a very good opener to kind of explore different series. In that context, I do think Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re also opened up the doors and built a foundation for future seinen series to flourish and become successful in a Western demographic, not only just in Japan. Tokyo Ghoul was a massive thing across the globe. And I think in a lot of ways, in contrast to shonen series, it had a lot of things kind of foreboding over it to begin with. The fact that the series is so dark and complex already targets a set audience completely different to the shonen demographic. But on top of that, it also can't be marketed the exact same way. A series I should mention, which may help you kind of understand this a bit easier, or at least the idea that I'm going for, is Kingdom. A lot of people do not know what Kingdom is. You may have seen the word Kingdom. If you keep up to date with the sales every single year, you'll probably see Kingdom in the top 5 or top 10 or even top 3. And you've probably wondered all these years, what is that series? But you've never gone through the effort to actually look it up. Kingdom is virtually unknown to the Western audience. And I say that lightly just because on a marketing standpoint and on a sales standpoint, they don't sell physical volumes. The series isn't translated to English. The only way you can read Kingdom is online. And yet Kingdom, being a political seinen series, which is incredibly well done, mind you, is super successful. And when I say super successful, I'm in a long-running seinen series, almost 600 chapters, that has been dominating the seinen community every single year. Someone that Sue Ishida even looked up to as a hardworking author competes every single year with the likes of One Piece and Attack on Titan, selling top 3, top 5 every single year. I don't think it's ever been out of top 10, and yet it's virtually unknown. Why is that? Why do you think that's a thing? When I talk about Kingdom like that, the same kind of ripple effect goes towards Tokyo Ghoul. Seinen series aren't commonly accepted. They're very difficult from a business perspective, at least in my opinion, to market and sell, because just like anything that is gruesome or extremely complex or political in Kingdom's aspect is extremely difficult to kind of make money off. The audience is very limited and targeted, and it's something that you can't spread everywhere. Only as of recently has Kingdom kind of branched out and managed to, I believe, be published in French, which is a very good start for that series. It's so extremely popular. I also want to mention a negative note, and that is the Tokyo Ghoul anime. Now, there's a lot of things that come into play with the anime, why it got treated the way it did in terms of business and money, etc., etc. But I just want to reiterate that the Tokyo Ghoul franchise is absolutely massive. This series is incredibly massive across the globe. I feel like Ishida is also the only author to kind of split up his story in 2 different parts and have his second part of the story just as successful as his original one. That is a very interesting thing to do. It's a very risky thing. I can imagine if a lot of other authors tried to do that, they would ultimately fail or wouldn't get anywhere close to the success of their original series. But Sue Ishida pulled it off, and all for the sake of his story. Not for some popularity stunt, not for some sequel, Next Generations. It was because he was writing a legitimate story. It was something that he planned out and wanted to do. Some could even call it a career killer, but obviously it wasn't. In that aspect, the anime got treated so evidently poorly in every single aspect. The animation was nowhere near as good as it could have been for a successful story. The storytelling itself was completely butchered. The overall management for the show, the marketing for it, what it was trying to push as an anime adaptation of a very successful, complex seinen story was completely belligerent. It was unacceptable. The Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Reanime is unacceptable as an anime adaptation. That does not correlate to if you like it or not, right? Because if you do like it, that's perfectly fine. If you got your enjoyment out of it, that's perfectly fine. But the anime series itself is nowhere near what it could have been. Going back and watching the anime, it's only a very, very small and misconstrued concept and version of the manga, right? The anime has no correlation with the manga similar whatsoever. It's not even the same atmosphere, it's hardly telling the same story, it's completely off. That's including the first season, which a lot of people praise as being the best. It is a very good season, but it is still not Tokyo Ghoul in that aspect. It's almost like they tried to mimic an anime adaptation of what Tokyo Ghoul should have been. It just felt completely off. The whole tone of that first season was off, and then everything after that just kept going downhill until we get to Tokyo Ghoul Re, which, mind you, is a completely different atmosphere, but feels so stale in design. It feels like they tried to pander so hard to a much wider audience, to the quote-unquote shonen audience, by taking everything out that makes Tokyo Ghoul compelling or interesting, right? That gives it the composure that it does, that gives it the foundation and the core construct that it does. Ripping all of that out and putting that into a unfaithful, misconstrued anime adaptation. Is it because Tokyo Ghoul's a seinen series? Maybe. I do want to mention that some of the worst anime adaptations are actually seinen. I think Berserk has one of the worst anime adaptations other than its first season. I don't even think Kingdom has an anime adaptation, or at least if it does, it's not very long. Terror for Mars is not necessarily a great anime adaptation either. There are so many seinen series that are super successful, and I mean the equivalent of popularity from, you know, My Hero Academia to Attack on Titan to One Piece. These series should be getting a respectable anime adaptation. Berserk should have a respectable anime adaptation, but it doesn't. It is one of the classic seinen series that is extremely popular. On the other hand of that argument, Tokyo Ghoul Re is the most recent weekly seinen series that sold extremely well, and yet it still had a horrible anime adaptation. And yet every single year we see these shonen series getting absolutely phenomenal anime adaptations, and it's not something that is a bad thing, right? I'm glad that these shonen series are getting really good anime adaptations. They're not always perfect, you know what I mean, but they are good, they are high quality, they stay true to the story, and I can't be more happy for those series. But where is the love for the seinen series? Is the business so disclosed and disingenuous towards the seinen demographic that they don't want to push a successful anime like that? They don't want to market seinen series in both the manga format and the anime adaptation format? If anything, I hope Tokyo Ghoul's success opens the door for more studios and more people to see that yes, seinen series are successful. They can be successful. Not all of them, but the new generation of seinen series can ultimately sell really, really well, and people want it. Berserk will always be one of the oldest but greatest seinen series you can read. Tokyo Ghoul is one of the newest generation of seinen series, which is an incredible read in itself. It's kind of built upon the foundation of the predecessors. At the end of the day, all of this information and the comparison between shonen and seinen helps kind of build an idea for the quote-unquote next generation Tokyo Ghoul. I don't think there will be one. On a manga forefront because of how Sue Ishida feels, and on the anime forefront because of how poorly they treated the entirety of the franchise. They did not care about it. They did not want to promote it. They didn't even put the effort into following the core story, changing massively important details and just going into this completely unrealistic telling of what the story was really about. They completely missed the mark for it. They were on a whole different level of playing field, and it was not Tokyo Ghoul. It's almost like they wanted to put a shonen filter over it so they can make it more marketable to a bigger audience, but we don't need that. And I think more studios should take the gamble and be like, yes, this series is dark, but we want to portray it in that light. We want to see how successful it can be portraying it in the way it's meant to be portrayed, not trying to generalize it or quote unquote put a shonen filter over it to make it more adaptable and marketable. We may be shooting ourselves in the foot, but that is the risk we are willing to take as a business, and also being respectful to the original story. That's what we need. And in that instance, I don't think there's going to be a next generations. It's not Naruto, it's not Bleach, it's not like any other series that has a time skip and they're all grown up and they have children. I pray to God that they don't try and pick something from it. I pray to God an anime studio doesn't come through and try and swoop up some sort of next generation with Ichika, because realistically we don't need it. That's not what the story is about. The story is not about Ichika. The story is hardly even about Kaneki to begin with, alright? It's a completely separate narrative, alright? The story is conclusive in nature. You know, it starts and finishes with Sue Ishida's thoughts, and he wanted that story to have definitive answers, not some sort of sequel that he has nothing to be a part of because of money or because of success or fame or anything like that. I don't think any of that stuff matters to how Sue Ishida writes his story. after everything that I've talked about. Well, that was extremely long-winded. I'm not too sure how long this video is going to be, but I do apologize for its length. But hopefully this gives you a very interesting idea on both Sui Ishida's mindset towards the story and how he wanted it to be conclusive, how he's never really been on the money train or the fame train or anything like that. He kind of just wanted to write a story, and how also the shonen and seinen kind of demographics skewer completely in terms of success and marketability and ultimately pushing a story, and how that affects everything. A lot of things come into play in both the manga front for shonen and seinen as well as the anime front for shonen and seinen. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, but I'm actually going to end it off here, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.